is a question that I don't think we've really answered, but I think is a fundamental question to think about as we think about some of the other questions that we're going to answer in the future, which is how long is the pandemic going to last? And to be frankly honest, nobody knows. All we can do is look at what we have seen in history and see if we can extrapolate that information to what we're dealing with today. But it's still an important exercise to do, because when we're thinking about recommendations, when we're thinking about what we should be doing, we have to think about in the context of not what's going to happen in 1 or 2 weeks or even 1 or 2 months, but maybe in the context of 1 or 2 years. And so I want to show 3 different scenarios that are being proposed. And this is data from the Center for Infectious Disease Research and Policy. It's a group that's out of the University of Minnesota and includes experts from like Harvard School of Public Health. These are infectious disease epidemiologists. And they've actually published a really good report that I think is of high value to read. And the link's right here for anyone who wants to kind of read through the whole report. And what they've tried to do is say, okay, let's look back at previous pandemics and see what happened to them and what would it look like in our case in 2020 and 2021 if we followed the same patterns. And this was the pattern of the 1918-1919 pandemic, which was the last, the most major pandemic in the last 100 years. And what you could see here, and so if you this is projecting out for December 2019 out to April 2022, and we are right now in this part right here where we have this first peak in the spring of 2020. And similarly, in 1918, there was a peak in the spring of 1918. Now, what happened in the 1918 pandemic is that they had a large second wave. And it really was the fall of 1918 that you saw the highest number of cases and bad outcomes occur. It then leveled off. They had another kind of peak, not as bad as the spring of 1918, but they had another one in the spring of 1919, and then it essentially petered out in the summer of 1919. And the whole idea of this concept of this large second peak is that you end up getting so many people infected that essentially you've developed that herd immunity on a relatively short period of time. So by the time that 18 months has kind of passed, the virus has kind of gotten less impactful in society. Now, any of these scenarios are possible, but we feel that this is not a probable scenario because there's a lot of things that have happened in the last 100 years in medicine and in healthcare and in public health. We're now in a position where we know so much more information. All of the things that we've been doing from a public health perspective is all designed to try to mitigate these types of curves. And so we don't think that we don't think we're going to necessarily follow the 1918-19 model. Another scenario might be this one, what's called peaks and valleys. And it's again, essentially, we have where we are today in the spring of 2020, and then in the summer we get a valley, things level off, and then in the fall we get another one, and then it levels off, and then there's another peak. And you can see this wave. And this one, I think, if anyone looks at it, would be extremely frustrating, because if you look at this, you would start to think, well, maybe, whatever is happening here to us right now over the last 2 months, we get relaxed, and then, oh no, all of a sudden, we're gonna have the exact same things happen to us here, and then a few months later, it's gonna happen again. And that's not necessarily the true reality of this type of scenario. The biggest difference between this peak and this peak is the time between the two, and the knowledge that's gained, and the ability to prepare, and the fact that society has become accustomed to it. And so at future peaks, we have better antiviral agents, we have better mechanisms to control things. A lot of the physical restrictions that we've been doing now have really just been there to buy time, to get better tests, to get better preparation, to stock up on PPE, things like that. So we'll be at a better position to fight this virus at this point in time, even if we end up seeing a similar number of cases. The scenario that we're hoping to see is going to be this slow burn scenario. And that's really where the worst of it is behind us. But what we realize is that even as we get past this first wave, we haven't actually eradicated the virus. The only way that we essentially kind of get rid of this virus is if we have a vaccine against it, or enough people are infected that they start to protect other people, and we have less infections from person to person. In this scenario, though, we constantly are seeing COVID cases month after month after month, but never at a point where it overwhelms the healthcare system. And again, knowledge is advancing month after month, and we are ready and we're prepared. So the reason that I think this is important to show you these different scenarios and to recognize and to acknowledge that this is likely going to be a battle that we have over not months, but probably years, is that when we start to think about other questions and how we answer them and what recommendations we give you, we have to realize that these are things that are going to happen over the course of months, if not years. And so we need to balance the recommendations we give to you in the context of the reality of where the world is going.